Hey guys, I'm working on my foam head cranial nerve assignment this week. I kind of just wanted to introduce my head a little bit here and kind of go over what I have drawn. So as you can see on the side of my head, there's three kind of regions outlined here. So these three regions are the areas that innervate the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5. So what we have here is V1, which is this area here. It's innervated by the ophthalmic nerve. B2 is this area here. That's innervated by the maxillary nerve. And then B3, that's innervated by the mandibular nerve. Next up, I just wanted to point out the masseter muscle, which is this area here. And its innervation by the V3 branch of the trigeminal nerve. In other words, the mandibular nerve of V3 innervates the masseter muscle. So in order to monitor cranial nerve 5, you're going to need to know this location of the masseter muscle. And in order to do that, you're going to want to find the mandibular angle, which is this area here on myself. Go 2 finger breaths up, and then 2 finger breaths forward. So that'll leave us in this area here. So on the foam head, mandibular angle stays right here. Go 2 finger breaths up, and then 2 finger breaths forward, and that'll put us in this area here. And we're using 2 needle electrodes because it's a bipolar montage. So that'll leave us with this setup. These are referential montages, so we will need to place a reference electrode. Both of the needles won't be going into the same muscle. We'll put 1 needle, reference point, 1 needle in the muscle of interest. So to monitor cranial nerve 3, our electrode placements are going to include FPZ as our reference electrode. Over there. And then we're also going to want to place an electrode in the inferior rectus. So in order to get to that muscle, we're going to gently push up the eye when the eyelid's closed. So push up the eyeball a tiny bit. Go to the midpoint of the inferior part of the orbit. And then place the electrode in the direction away from the eyeball in the intraorbital space. So that will give us our monitoring for cranial nerve 3, FPZ, and the inferior rectus. In order to monitor cranial nerve 4, or the trochlear nerve, we're going to need 1 reference electrode at FPZ, which I'm placing right in the middle of the forehead. And then we're going to need a second electrode that is going to be placed within the superior oblique muscle. So that's going to be above the eye this time. So we're going to gently press down on the eyeball with the eyelids closed. Find the midpoint of the superior orbit, and then go medial to that a little bit. And then go into the intraorbital space there. And you can secure with tape or tegaderm, and that'll be how we monitor for the trochlear nerve. Superior oblique, FPZ. For cranial nerve 6 monitoring, the abducens nerve, we're going to need to place a reference electrode again. We're going to use FPZ, middle of the forehead, and then we're going to need to place a second needle in the lateral rectus. So we're going to push the eyeball gently, medially, in order to find the midpoint of the lateral orbit, and then we're going to put our electrode into the intraorbital space there and secure it with tape or tegaderm. So we have lateral rectus right here, FPZ, and that will be how we monitor cranial nerve 6. So now we have the other side of the head. I just want to go through and kind of explain what I have drawn here. So this is the frontalis muscle. This is orbicularis oculi muscle, nasalis muscle, orbicularis oris muscle around the lips, mentalis muscle on the chin, platysma muscle on the neck region. I don't know if you can tell, the orange is for the platysma. And then the parotid gland is kind of these like swirly green lines here, this area. And then we have the extracranial pathway of the facial nerve, and that's represented with these branches here. I'll explain those in a little bit. So we have the extracranial pathway of the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7. So basically, there's 5 branches that innervate 6 muscles. So there's the temporal branch, and that innervates orbicularis oculi and the frontalis muscle. We have the zygomatic branch, and that innervates the orbicularis oculi and the nasalis. We have the buccal branch, and that innervates orbicularis oris. Then we have the mandibular branch, and that innervates the mentalis. Then we have finally the cervical branch, and that innervates the platysma. As far as the parotid gland goes, its relationship to the facial nerve is that you can see it right here is pretty much intertwined with the facial nerve. So if there's like a tumor or a growth pressing on those branches, there could be a lot of problems stemming from that. And being that they're all generally in that area of the parotid gland, there's a very good chance of it affecting that. So I know that I kind of went over this already, but I did just kind of want to point it out using the foam head. So here, the extracranial pathway starts, stylomastoid foramen, comes out, branches into the 5 branches. So this first one, the temporal branch, innervates the frontalis muscle and the orbicularis oculi. Then we have the zygomatic branch, and that's going to innervate the orbicularis oculi and the nasalis. Then we have the buccal branch, and that's going to innervate the orbicularis oris, they're on the mouth. Then we have the mandibular branch, innervating the mentalis. And then lastly, we have the cervical branch, innervating the platysma in the neck region. So in order to monitor the facial nerve, we're going to use bipolar montages. So this is, again, placing 2 needle electrodes within the belly of the one muscle. I'm going to start with placing electrodes within the frontalis muscle. That is this muscle in the forehead area, and how we're going to locate that is going 4 to 5 centimeters above the orbit. So I'm going to find the forehead's orbit, which is, I would say, around here, and go up 4 to 5 centimeters, which I would say is around here. Place the needles 1 to 2 centimeters apart. Say that is our location for that. With monitoring this frontalis muscle, we are looking at the temporal branch that's innervating that muscle. So next up, we're going to place electrodes within the orbicularis oculi. So that's this area of the eye right here. So what we need to do is place them above the eyebrow. So we're going to start inserting the needle lateral and then go more medial, so towards the nose. And we're using 2 needle electrodes within the same belly of the same muscle because it's a bipolar montage. So what they'll look like is these 2 here for the orbicularis oculi. And for the innervating branch to the orbicularis oculi, it's going to be the temporal and the zygomatic branch going to the orbicularis oculi around the eye. So next up, we're going to place electrodes within the nasalis muscle. In order to do that, we're going to place them, inserting them more laterally and then towards more medial. We're going to go to the lateral aspect of the nose here and put them in here. Again, a bipolar montage, so 2 needles within the same belly of the muscle. And you also want to just be aware that your needle point isn't crossing the midline here, that it's taking the data from this side of the nose. So the branch innervating the nasalis is going to be the zygomatic branch. Next up is orbicularis oris. And it's going to be this muscle around the lips. So in order to place our electrodes there, we're going to want to go lateral to medial again, just above the lip. So lateral to medial, just above the lip. So that is where I would place the orbicularis oris electrodes. Again, the branch that's innervating the orbicularis oris is going to be this branch right here, which is the buccal branch. Next up, we are going to place our needles in the mentalis muscle. So we're going to look at the chin area here. It's our mentalis muscle. And we're going to want to place our needle electrodes in that lateral to medial direction, just like we did with the nasalis. And just make sure that we aren't crossing this midline here. And that should be our electrode placement for mentalis. The innervating branch for the mentalis is the mandibular branch. So lastly, we have our platysma muscle, and that's located in this general neck area. And a guideline to go by is going 4 to 5 centimeters below the mandible. So that's like the jawline. So 4 to 5 centimeters below that. It's about that area there, I would say, is our electrode location for the platysma. And again, the platysma is innervated by the cervical branch of the facial nerve. I did just want to clear it up just to make sure that it is known that each muscle, when monitoring the facial nerve, has a bipolar montage. So there's 2 needles within each muscle. The frontalis, there's 2 in the oculi, there's 2 in the nasalis, 2 in the oris, 2 in the mentalis, and 2 in the platysma.